and folks can keep joining, and this will also be recorded. So thank you all for joining us today. I'm just going to say a couple brief words and then hand things over to Erin, who is the mastermind of this session. So really, this came to be because of a grant that we received from the Argosy Foundation, and one of the things that was part of that scope of work was to enhance our agility funding line item that we have that Logan Nichols, our chief research officer, started up a few years back now. I guess it's been 1 or 2 years ago, 2 years ago at least, to be able to provide some startup support for Anther Therapeutics. Erin will give you a little bit more background on that in a moment, but in deciding what a deliverable for something like that might look like, Erin and I had some chats about it and really decided that some sort of roadmap or blueprint for him documenting the process as a fledgling startup and really seeing what his process was like. And, I was imagining like a report or something we could maybe turn into a deck that we could share with the community. But in sort of true Aaron fashion, the first time we had a meeting to go through what he was doing, I was like, oh, that works too. So he has been incredibly generous with, as has Anther overall, with sharing the experience. I think it's fair to say that the documentation that's created on the playbook is truly a labor of love. I think we've well, I have not been meeting as frequently, but I know that Erin and our colleague Janine and Sabi have been meeting on a regular basis, weekly, prepping all of this. And I know that there's a lot of excitement about finally sharing this with everyone. And we hope this is the amazing resource for you all that we think it is. I know for me, the bar was pretty low. This isn't an area that I know much about, the startup world. And we all know the contraceptive space is pretty unique as well. So to have a documented experience of what that process has been like from a contraceptive startup founder is, I think, really invaluable. And as we've been going through, our hope is that this will save people, honestly, weeks, if not months of time navigating and understanding and researching and really get people just, that much further ahead when they start the process. So I want to take a moment to thank Aaron again for just the time and effort he's put into this. It's been a huge effort on top of trying to do a startup and his role at MCI. I'd like to thank Janine Kopp for her contributions and guidance over the many months as well. I'd like to thank Sabi for all of her work and translating the playbook into an engaging format for our website that hopefully you guys will all find helpful to navigate everything. And again, I'd like to thank MCI's primary donor and Argosy Foundation for their support for this activity. So I'm going to hand it over to Erin, and we've decided that we'll keep this informal. We're back to the old lemonade stand style. So please put your questions in the chat and we'll be monitoring. And depending on how specific or general it is, we'll even be interrupting during the presentation. So this is meant to be very conversational. So from here, I will hand it over to Erin. Thank you all
Thanks,
again
Ellie.
for joining.
Can everyone hear me now?
Yes.
Awesome. Thanks a lot.
Yes.
And I think we can send the slides afterwards in a PDF format. That should be totally fine. There's some links embedded in also. So yeah, if you want to be ready with a QR code, you can even flip to a couple of things. And I should also say from the outset that unfortunately it will just be me flying solo, walking through the slides, although Sabi will share her screen and walk through sort of a live demo of the playbook as well. But Janine played a huge role in this, and she got severely ill today or yesterday. She's based in Switzerland as well, so it's kind of late in the evening for her. And so a lot of credit goes to her as well, and I'll give her credit throughout. So to keep it a little bit simple, what we thought was we'd just introduce everyone who could join to our backgrounds a little bit, so you kind of have a sense of who we are and who we're coming from, meaning Janine and myself primarily. then what are the motivations for writing this and providing this as a resource for the community, but in a way the public. So then, of course, it's just kind of walking through what you'll find within here. So it's a bit of a table of contents within like a live walkthrough from Sabi. And depending on the time, then I've got several slides that I hope provide a little context of Anther Therapeutics, so you have an understanding of what that journey's been like, any sort of pivots along the way, and what we're thinking about right now, and then a little bit of general outlook on the biotech VC landscape right now, and sort of associated funding mechanisms. So, without too much more, we've already said please drop the questions in the chat. I think I'll mention one other thing, and that this was, well, we'll get to what the playbook is in the next slide. So I'll start with a huge shout out to Heather Vedat and also Sabi. I think actually Heather doesn't realize how when we have small team internal meetings, a lot of times she sparks these really big ideas that can turn into something very useful for the field and for networking and for things that do have a snowballing effect. And so, and this is definitely one of those. She started mentioning how nice it would be to have X, Y, and Z together, and the vision of maybe what we could do kind of came from that. So I give her really credit for this. Yeah, absolutely, Jennifer. So who am I? I am an entrepreneur in residence at MCI. I also am a co-founder of Anther Therapeutics. And again, we'll walk through what Anther is in a second. My background is from a scientific training that's quite broad, from chemistry and chemical biology to developmental biology and reproductive biology. And then that was my sort of academic training throughout that transition and that career journey. I got connected with the MCI and was a postdoc fellow. But then I left my postdoc to join a startup company called Vibliome Therapeutics as head of biology. And that company was very focused on small molecule therapeutics in oncology and in inflammatory disorders. But when Vibliome wound their operations down at the end of 2023, it gave me the opportunity to step into a full-time role within 2024. And that's what sort of sparked what you see here today and also led to Anther. And I'll briefly mention and introduce the great Janine Kopp, who is a reproductive health strategist at large. She is an angel investor of sorts for certain around certain theses in women's health and reproductive health. Her background is on the pharmaceutical sciences side of things. She spent a number of years at Takeda Pharmaceuticals in the venture studio and digital health venture studio specifically realm. So she's worn the hat of a corporate VC, as well as she started her own company in women's health for a PCOS company. And but she's been a big help, I'd say, to MCI and as a consultant and an advisor this year. And when I mentioned I was working on this type of a project, she was really interested and really helpful to dig in. So what is MCI's startup founder playbook? And this QR code, I think, should get you to the website that's linked there in the bottom. And I kind of want to emphasize from the get-go, of course, most people do this to set expectations. This is really an introduction. So it's maybe not the master's level, of course, of any of the concepts that are within, but it should be viewed as a practical guide for, let's say, someone with, like myself, a scientific background that's transitioning to an interesting idea that could be a new venture, or a new company, or a new type of organization. And there's a lot of language, vocabulary, and tools that you need to bring to bear to something like that. And anyone going through that experiences a steep learning curve. And so having experienced that or currently walking through it, it was a good opportunity, I think, for this community to get some of the insights as I kind of learned them. And also having Janine on the other side of the table as a former investor and current angel investor, it was sort of a nice dynamic to build this sort of a program. And I think that also has already described a bit of the motivation. So from my side, like I said, I wear a couple of hats, and one of them, when I joined the MCI, the MCI has this really interesting uh, organization underneath it called the Contraceptive Accelerator Network. And it is a great mechanism to help collaborate on some research that falls between sort of academic discovery and maybe where a company might be formed. And so thinking about how does that continue to evolve with the type of projects that are available and the funding landscape, it kind of led to a lot of ideas. Does it look like an incubator? Does it look like an accelerator? How do we kind of float that? But the reality is the funding landscape is very difficult right now, and it sort of led down a path that if there is something to be done right now and bring the sort of skills that the team that I have as colleagues, if we can bring those skills to the space right now, it made a lot of sense for it to be anthrotherapeutics. And again, there's more coming from that. But there's also the motivation from the investor point of view, which is, of course, they have to field hundreds or thousands of pitches, if you will, each year. And I think the quality of these is always increasing, but we want to make sure that the male contraceptive, the contraceptive community at large, is always sort of learning as fast as possible about how all the different funding mechanisms are shaping and how we can best position our community to get the funding that it needs to push all kinds of projects forward. And so this is no different from the others. Okay, so with that sort of intro, allow me to walk you through the table of contents. And there's a couple of sections that are highlighted throughout. That was actually Janine picking out her favorite subsection underneath each of these chapters. And really what you might find when Sabi starts showing this live is that it kind of feels like a course or like a self-walk book, online, resource. And so with that in mind, things are kind of set up in these sections with sort of like chapters, and you can flip through them and sort of learn as you go or jump to areas that you want. And then there's a resource guide at the end. So of course, it's kind of starting with the basics, just getting started. There's a little bit of an overwhelming readiness checklist in the beginning to kind of just get everyone thinking about all the different things that you're going to face if you start a company in the biotech or medtech or health tech world. And then it's really outlining what we hope is a reasonably comprehensive look of all the different funding opportunities that are available. Many of them that are of the granting nature or non-dilutive will be very familiar with research scientists. And then we have chosen also to then dig deeper on venture capital. And that it comes with its own nuances of language and vocabulary, and it typically falls outside of the scope of what most scientists are being trained to think about. And so that's really where section 3 digs deep. And so that's kind of what the process is like, how to do it. And in each of these sections, we've, of course, kept it pretty general. That should be applicable, I think, for anyone trying to form a biotech or a medtech or health tech company or tech bio company. But whenever we could, we put a little founder tip or sort of contraceptive tip box that kind of can lead a founder who's in our space, working on the challenges that we think about as founders in the space. Little nuances about what it was like to walk through the process from, let's say, my point of view, for instance. Most of this is objective. Some of it is, of course, subjective. And I should also say that we've tried to strike a conversational tone so that this playbook, I hope, is very accessible and maybe not fun, but sort of fun to walk through and maybe chuckle at. And so approach it with that in mind as well. We want it to just be something that you can read through and learn a lot, but also read through quickly. So there's a small section about post-funding opportunity or operations, sort of, if you're successful, awesome, you've got some money coming in, how do you want to approach just a few key areas after that to hit that right? And then section 5 is, I'm sure, where founders will kind of maybe even jump to, jumping over the rest in a way. And there's a lot of templates and guides, and importantly, links to other resources where you can find other people's playbooks and things like that are out there. So in a way, this is kind of a curation of what you can find online, and hopefully it is applicable to the community of folks online today. Okay, so section one, how do you start up, right? So this was like super daunting if you're coming at it as like a postdoc out of a academic lab. But of course, there are a lot of new ventures that are founded every day, and so there's a lot of things that are kind of known and cookie cutter about this. So we've prepared this section according to the following subsections. There's a sort of readiness guide that walks through a whole laundry list of really honestly everything else that's in the playbook and is kind of a self. You can print it out and just very quickly fill out, or download it and very quickly sort of yes, no, quick phrases about this is what we've got for this concept. This is what we know about this section. Do we need a lab space? Do we have the lease? Whatever. So that's in that. There's a quick mention of spinning out from a university. We've gotten some folks who have experience with that from the OTL side as well as a legal counsel side. So that section, again, it's just an introduction, but should help you have a little bit more confidence with strategizing around how you would want to think about spinning out from a university if that's applicable to anyone who's digging in on this playbook. Then there's a short section on the incorporation tactics and sort of how do you do it. And again, it's sort of language equipping. And then there's a tech stack, which is just walking you through the different types of software applications that might be applicable that you want to think about. And again, it's just more like, okay, you're going to have to kind of bring all these online and marry them together so that you can stay organized and actually have an operable company. And then another section that Janine really wanted to hit on is a very important one on mental health. I think it's kind of difficult to found a company in any time period. Right now, if you're in deep tech, but specifically biotech and medtech with an eye towards therapeutics or anything around the margins of that, it's extra challenging. And I think when I wrap up at the end, you'll have a better sense of the outlook of the space right now. Okay, so moving along to section two, I'm going to kind of blow through some of these now because I really think it's probably more engaging if you can watch Sabi go through these sections and kind of get a live view of it and a feel. But in this section number two, it's a landscape of what NIH grants are available. Tried to get those up to date or be comprehensive, but go to the NIH website for those. Don't completely trust what we've curated on there for the up-to-date information, but the list is there, all the way to a long list of incubators and accelerator programs that I think is pretty comprehensive for biotech companies looking to take advantage of that. And what is an incubator? Is kind of all of those things are defined. But then we also march down the path towards venture capital. And there's a section that describes what it is, how venture capital works at a very high level economically, and the sort of money and cash flows through biotech that incentivizes VCs to invest in the space, and what sort of returns they need to justify those incentives. And part of that is understanding the hierarchy of the VC fund, how they make money, how they think, and what sort of returns they need on what sort of timescale. And you can kind of see how very quickly it requires a special type of investor that has an understanding of the timescales and the difficulties in the space. And it's very challenging. So they'll invest in a number of companies, expecting a small fraction of those companies to provide a big return. And I think that that ropes itself into what is known as the biotech social contract. And this concept, I think, explains how early stage investment in, let's just say, biotechs feed the industry, and how the return on investment comes back to incentivize that innovation. And then from society's point of view, the importance of things going generic so that over time we have a low cost armamentarium of drug products available. So it's kind of all tied together, and we've presented that concept there. Then section three, there's a lot of meat in this section. So this is a little bit of a longer section here, but it's got a lot of just hard-hitting information about how would you think about preparing a data room for investors that want to dig in and do diligence. If you're lucky enough to get into that depth of a conversation with a fund. or an investor. Then some thoughts on the pitch, of course, huge part of it. A lot of different versions of pitching that you'll that you'll face, and then a bit of strategy on outreach for fundraising. And there's some conference links that are useful. What's the VC process? How do they evaluate your startup? What are they looking for? It's really about de-risking a key set of parameters in as much as it is sort of building a relationship with you as a founder. Then, what's in a term sheet when you get a deal and you're looking to close and negotiate and close a deal? You need to understand all the terms in a term sheet, from the economic side to the company control side. And if you've never seen those terms before, it's useful to understand what they are. And I mean, now it's quick to look these things up and dig deep with AI tools, but I think having all of it curated in one section will also be helpful. So that should be a good. This whole section should be very useful, I would imagine. And then a little bit about landing the plane and getting everything to come together. And section 4, as I mentioned, is then once the money is wired and you have cash in an account, there's a few things that you want to think deeply about when you're creating a board of directors, if you're far enough along where that's a requirement and useful. Obviously, hiring the team is a huge part of all this. So we've got a section on that, and then a section on commercialization, and also think about commercialization globally as MCI continues to think about that and help the community think about it. And then I will flip it to Sabi here after I just round out the last section, which is section 5. And in here, we're calling it sort of the resources and templates. And the first section is something that is more of a showcase of the fact that if you start up a new company in a space that, especially something like male contraception, it's very important to understand what the trends are within the industry, within society, with cultural influences, political influences that might matter. So it's just an example of the type of news reports and links that are kind of useful to keep your eyes and ears open for. And then some templates for one-pagers for like briefs and company memos to quickly showcase to potential investors who you are and what you're doing and what they would get if they invested. And then a couple of pitch deck examples that we've actually pulled from other founder playbooks that are public that are quite nice starting points. And then I think one thing that we can highlight is an investor outreach tool. And so really, I think this is probably one of the jewels, if you will, out of this whole founder playbook. And what that is Sabi is going to walk through this, but it's a curated list of 430 some odd VCs that I did homework on and Anther did homework on. And I'll show you how we've organized that, but I think that it's going to be a very useful tool for anyone looking at the players in the space. And again, the version that you'll see as a template is geared towards someone starting a very early stage company, maybe in the research space, and reaching out to very early stage VCs. And how do you prioritize them? And I'll walk through that, but that's good. That is a handy tool. And I think it's very difficult to find comprehensive lists of venture capitalists all the way from angels to early stage investors. And then there's a couple other templates in here, building out, high level budget forecasts, cap tables, and then, like I said, some early external resources. So I was able to get through all of that in the time I was hoping to. I'm going to stop sharing, and Sabi should be able to bring up her screen now. And I'm excited to have you guys see what she's built here. It's really great.
Yeah, thanks, Aaron. So as Aaron mentioned, this is a playbook. It's meant to have you go through it sequentially. So we, on the landing page, well, first, if you're familiar with MCI's website, you can find it under the Get Involved tab. We'll be highlighting it on several other pages as well. But once you get to the landing page, you can scroll down and see, like Aaron said, we have these different sections. I'm going to just click through a couple of pages just to show you how to navigate the website. So I'll start here in section 1, founder readiness. And on each page, you'll see this top section of text is generally the introduction of the page. And then when you scroll down, some pages, like Aaron said, have a lot of information. You might find tables or videos or graphics, questions, etc. On this page, you'll find a questionnaire. And so you can copy it into your Google Drive. You can click to download the PDF and save it to your computer. So just keep that in mind as you go through the playbook, that there's a lot of different resources that you'll find if you click through. On each page, you will also find navigation buttons at the bottom and at the top of the screen. So you can just go through sequentially, like I mentioned, chapter by chapter, or you can go back to the home page and click through any that you would like. I did want to highlight, I'm going to scroll down to section 3, the VC process. So one thing that I wanted to highlight here, Aaron touched on it briefly, was the founder tips. So scrolling down, you can see this call out box right here. And it's actually, there are a lot of tips in this section. And as Aaron and Janine were going through and creating the content for the playbook, there were multiple times where they wanted to share more about their experience, their tips and tricks that they learned. And so we started putting together these founder tips, and I think that they are really great. So keep an eye out for the tips throughout the whole playbook. They are all over. And yeah, I won't make you all dizzy by scrolling through too fast through all of the different sections, but I definitely encourage you to explore it. I'm going to go back to the landing page, and before I highlight the resources and guides, I just wanted to show at the bottom of the page, we have a couple of links here. We'd really love anyone's feedback on the playbook. This is definitely, as Aaron mentioned, something that is a resource for the community, and we know that a lot of people have a lot of different knowledge. And so you can click this link and it'll take you to a Google form. We'd love to hear your feedback. Additionally, after this initial launch, Aaron and Janine are going to be hosting some office hours just to make sure people's questions are answered. You can talk to them live. So this will take you to a Zoom link to register for upcoming office hours. And the last thing I wanted to walk through before flipping it back to Aaron was the resources and guides section. So this section, we have them all listed here. You can click on any of them and it will either take you to a page on MCI's website or download a new page. Or you can click here and get to the landing page where you can see a description of each resource. So you can see there are a lot of different resources, and like Aaron said, the investor tracking template is one thing that we really wanted to highlight. So I am going to open it up and let Aaron talk everyone through it.
Nice. Thanks, Sammy. Yeah, this is when Heather says labor of love. That made me laugh. This is in that category. So what you'll find here, there's a lot of columns moving, of course, left to right in how this is designed. And 430 some or whatever it is as of now, rows, which is each individual fund. And as you walk across here, you'll have the website to get the fund, what type of fund it is. So is it an impact VC, an angel, things like that. Most of these are VCs. And then the location and investment region, these are, sort of not useful until they're very useful when you're trying to plan to visit to the Boston or New York area and like, oh, what funds are even located there? So I can try to hit them up to engage. Oh, I should know where they're located. So I have found that those are very useful. I think the other thing I'll give a shout out to is the fact that I tried to go through here and include, I should say this is a really labor of the team at Anther putting this together who helped me go through this. And we not just did we focus on North America, I guess is how to put it. So as much as we could, we have grabbed investors globally and just described which region that they invest in. And some are only in the Nordic region, some are in the UK only, some are in the US only, or some North America, and then some everywhere. So there's that information. And then the stage is another really important aspect to, obviously you don't want to talk to a private equity growth fund that only funds, very, very late stage or crossover to the public markets. If you're, unless you're at that stage. And so if you're very early R&D, then you want to hit the stage right. And so it's really pre-seed, seed, Series A, and Series B+. Those are the categories you'll find, which are generally applicable, I think, right now for where the milestones are in biotech for all the companies in the space, really, to be honest, for our community. And then there's a few other useful columns. You can read them as they go across here. First check size is an interesting one. Some of these, it's very difficult to find this information out. So there's blanks where blank. This, of course, is meant to be a template for your venture. And so your intros to these companies, you'll want to list there as you obtain them. But then I think a couple of other very intriguing columns start to pop up, which really help you prioritize things. So it's what tech sectors, that's really important. If you're a medical device company versus a therapeutics company, you'll probably want to focus on funds that invest in slightly different theses. And so that's perhaps a subjective categorization of each fund that is from, let's say, the Anther team, but is reasonably accurate for what we've experienced looking through all of these websites and talking to many of these folks. And I'll give you a rundown on that in a second. So I think a very interesting column is column L. Are they already investing in a contraceptive company? Again, most of this information is accurate as you can find by what's available on the VC's pages. And that's how we filled out that column. So that's all publicly available information, which means that we might have gotten a no that is really a yes that we're unaware of. But for the most part, the VCs and investors that have stated that they're investing in a male contraceptive company are listed there. And of course, so let's say you're working in a female contraception or you're working in a different therapeutic area and you want to use this spreadsheet, you could still use it and just change that column to be something that's useful for your needs, right? This is a pretty general thing that you can make into your own, depending upon what you're building. So the real subjective columns are the next two, which is, do they have potential to invest either for the first time or further from any current investments or interest in male contraception specifically? And again, that's sort of subjective, obviously, but might be a handy way to gauge what feedback someone who's out there beating the bushes is hearing. And then I think the other important one is to kind of understand what milestone are these funds interested in seeding or funding or supporting right now. And that's a really tricky one to get the honest truth on. But we've done our best to present that information. So all of those columns to the left should help a founder or a founding team fill out column O, which is how do you want as a venture to prioritize outreach to these venture funds or angel investors or groups or what have you, so on and so forth. So that becomes a really critical column to start to filter and sort this once you start using this. And all of the columns that kind of roll out to the right of that have useful status updates and contact information, columns and just things that will be useful as you start to do your outreach and take notes from these funds. And of course, all of this is a template, so make it your own. And I apologize if some of the columns are more useful than others, but I think you'll enjoy walking through here to some degree. So there you have it. And I see some people already popping on, so that's great. Okay, I'm just popping over to the chat. I don't think there's any questions coming in quite yet. So I'll move it back to the slide deck that I was showing. Heather, can you give me a thumbs up that you can see that? Awesome. Okay, so this is kind of where it gets into shared experience, short show and tell section from Anther's point of view. And there's a little bit of the journey that we've walked on, any sort of pivots we've made along the way since founding Anther about a year ago, but really actively fundraising this calendar year. And that rolls out into sort of the early stage VC sentiments and then, of course, the outlook. And so I should say also, before I kind of walk down the Anther experience, there's a few folks that I see on the call from companies that have been successful at founding and funding very successful male contraceptive startups that are doing great work in clinical development. And we're all looking to continue to be the rising tide that buoys everyone else in the field. So I would say this is the perspective from Anther. Anther hasn't had tremendous success landing and closing its initial rounds. So also, if you are on the call and I'm looking at someone like Kevin, Akash, Nadia, Darlene, et cetera. Those folks can probably answer some questions that people have better than I can. And I want to acknowledge that and acknowledge the great work that the companies that are in the space actively fundraising have done, because they've really helped create a sense of, oh, there's something here in this field. So it's not like most of the VCs that I talk to haven't ever heard that male contraceptive is on the radar. And I think that's pretty huge. And that was one of the opportunities that made me think, or one of the things I noticed that made me think maybe there is an opportunity to continue to build the pipeline with other companies working on interesting and sort of orthogonal technologies to what we see. So again, back in the Vibliome experience that I had formerly as part of the management team, had some success in, I was not part of the initial founding of Vibliome as the management team and that fundraising, but I was part of the team that landed our Series A extension. But the world is very different now than it was in 2019 and 2021 and that experience. And so this has been a completely different ball game. And I've got 2 slides here to level set on like who and what is Anther, so you know what we're kind of presenting to the world. And then, yeah, just a bunch of me telling you the honest truth of what it has been like. So I founded Anther with the former COO of Vibliome, James Grenzebach, and he is the COO of Anther Therapeutics and a co-founder. And we have a core team. The technical team is all coming again from Anther, from Vibliome Therapeutics, and part of that. Part of what comes along for the ride is an operational model that we dialed in as a team together since 2019. And that's using an outsourced CRO operational model to deliver development candidates for, again, that was oncology and inflammatory disorders. And part of that was us building a custom medchem platform that allows us to use all the computational tools for ligand design and docking and ADME prediction, et cetera, to an electronic lab notebook system and in-house, data analysis and sort of an automated assay request process and tracking tool. So all of that sort of what you get with the Anther team. And here's the concept of the target product profiles that we aim to develop and how far along we are. So we are aiming to be a leading R&D organization in the space. We've got a lead program that would result in a once daily male pill solution, and that's target 1 listed here. That's primed for, we think, a quick lead optimization campaign. And then the other solution we're pursuing is more of an exploratory exercise right now to work and think about an on-demand, fast-acting pill. That's just all I really wanted to take the time at least to say right now about Anther. And now it's what's probably really most interesting is what is the experience like? And it has been a slow and painful journey. I think this is probably different from what anyone wants to experience going through this and the way that ideally it would work. And so even going through the guide, we have, thanks for the heart. In the guide, you'll find sort of the ideal situation. But again, right now, things are cyclical in investment. And right now in the biotech landscape, it's far from ideal unless you are raising around specific milestones that match exactly what VCs are trying to do right here and now. But let me walk through the slides in the last couple of minutes, and then we can flip to any sort of more of a dialogue. So again, I mentioned that the very earliest idea kind of came out from, is this like a translational incubator idea for the field? That was an interesting model. We did some exploratory work trying to see if the model would make sense, and as well as just what sort of targets and technologies would make sense. And that was probably only going to take projects so far, sort of preclinical stage. But really, where we've landed is more of a rifle shot pitch. That would be a classic biotech look and feel, although still a little bit too early from where most folks are allocating capital today. And that's a focused biotech on, I'm just saying here, next generation non-hormonal contraceptives, just broadly. But the idea is to take things through lead optimization and early human proof of concept, and then find the ideal partnerships and license agreements and things like that provide the early investors with returns. And there's a lot of opportunities in theory to have value creation walking that far along. But one of the things that has hurt the industry is the lack of a public market for liquidity for the early stage investors, and that kind of limits what's available right now. Just all that's in the playbook. And then I will say, even along the way, you will talk to investors that really like working with your team in theory, and they want to see how big or ambitious the venture could be if X, Y, and Z were also done. So when you're hustling and trying to explore all opportunities, we did explore a little bit of a side quest around some other indications that were project ideas that we had come up with as Viblium as a team. But right now, our current pitch is that we're actively raising around is in that middle category, and we aim to get lead program animal proof of concept with that. So I just put this out here. I mean, this is a reasonably transparent look at what Anther has gotten in the door so far through a foundational grant from MCI and research grants. Thank you. And a SAFE from a great VC fund out of the UK called Wilby Capital, and they're an accelerator for scientist founders. And so right now we're raising around the milestones that you see there. So I'll flip it to this. That really actually probably numerically walks through the slow and painful part. And we did homework, like I mentioned, it was less than 500 funds, or investors, but around 450. We reached out. It's 208, around 210 of those. It's about a 50% cut each of the sort of buckets that I've chosen to walk through here on the slide. Had some sort of email exchange or outreach or conversation with north of 100 of those. And I'd say that it felt like about 50 were interested in the field and following up. Some were never going to invest in like a biotech therapeutic company, but were super interested. And in so doing and getting that feedback, some of it was just by email, and some of it was, due diligence, nearing term sheets. We've heard back. We've gotten quite a bit of feedback, and really for the type of venture and the type of early stage program that we're proposing, we've gotten a lot of information about where the sweet spot is, and it's almost what's a necessity for VCs to jump in on a new company. So here's sort of the outlook. I'll try to get through some of this quickly in a couple of minutes. There's only a couple of slides left, but where are we sort of today in at least in the investor sentiment across the biotech landscape? And I use that term to encompass tech bio, medtech, health tech, as I mentioned early in the webinar. So apologies for kind of summing it all up under biotech. But it really is at a historic low. And that part is true, no matter who you talk to right now. I think there's probably 6 or 7 different reasons listed there. And it has, in a way, created this, it's sort of made the gap between haves and have-nots a little bit bigger. And if you're at a certain stage with a certain team, with certain data, it's probably okay, and you're having some love. But if not, it's a challenge. But that's the world of 2025, and it's been interesting because of that. I'm happy to answer questions or chat privately about the sort of reasons I've listed there, and there's some others as well. I should also mention that early stage investors is really Series A, and so what that translates to is actually probably phase two. I think seed stage startup in biotech right now, that is really approaching phase one. So you're in your first in human studies very quickly after receiving that seed investment right now. And typically biotech VCs, are doing those types of ventures with ex-pharma executives that I'm not getting any younger, but I don't have probably as much gray hair as the normal CEOs that are starting up companies right now and finding success in biotech. But the other interesting duality that I found is there are plenty of investors who are really intrigued about the space. Actually, most people I talk to are really interested. And quite a bit of the problem is finding a lead. Now, whether that's you're doing a priced round where someone's formally going to lead the valuation of the company and set the terms, or if you're even doing it with a rolling safe or simple agreement for equity. Most of the angel investors or non-biotech investors still want someone to lead the diligence on what you're doing. And so it's really important to have a biotech-minded person or group or fund or foundation or something really leading the diligence. And that creates a little bit of a catch-22 with the amount of capital that you might need and the groups that can lead those and the ones that are biotech savvy and can do the diligence. And so again, this is me reporting back what we've heard and felt. And again, great lessons that I've got from talking to other founders, some of which may be on the call, is believe the no, not the why. And so sometimes it's just subjective, of course, of our interpretation of what we're hearing. So throw that out there also as a caveat to everything that we've presented here. But yeah, we've got some lessons throughout, of course, in the tips boxes throughout the playbook. But I would say a few interesting things to note is that a lot of the VC model is they're managing their own portfolio, and sometimes that if funds have a thesis that's broad, they would be happy to invest in more than one company in a very specific space. But oftentimes that's not true. And if they've already invested in a male contraceptive company, I would think carefully about approaching them with your pitch, because all of this is about time management ultimately. And you might learn a few things, but really it's in many cases unlikely that a VC fund would, unless they kind of state it and it to be true up front, it can be very true that VC funds already investing in the space have already picked their winner. And that's part of the VC model, some of which is broken, to be honest, right now. But no matter what the case is, I would say that this whole thing is a balance between don't let perfect get in the way of good, but also you probably really do want to delay a targeted VC fundraising campaign until you're really sure that you've got the milestones and team and ask aligned with what the funds are looking to allocate capital into, which is of course common sense, but is important. And then that kind of all funnels into make use of the sort of R&D research friendly accelerators, incubators, early stage angels that have patient money, maybe family offices, that type of thing. And happy to chat more with folks that have questions. So again, I'll wrap up. I think there's rising interest in our space. There's appreciation for it. There's still plenty of people who don't know anything about it and anything about the market and need a ton of education. And so be prepared to educate investors on all of it. And so that means that your narrative needs to be tight around all the things. But all of these are, anyone building a biotech or deep tech company would need to have a tight narrative around all these aspects of what they're doing. And then the last bullet point is, it's kind of a joke, but don't believe anything a VC tells you until you've got their money in your bank account, and then just read between the lines. And I think what you'll find is that most investors, I mean, by and large, most very very helpful, very much lean in, but they're doing a job as well, and they're making a lot of decisions, seeing a lot of things thrown at them like a fire hose. So that's kind of the state of the state. So it's a shame that Janine wasn't on the call. She brings an entirely different perspective and a wealth of information that helped me a ton. And I think if you reach out, you'll really enjoy. Anyone who can communicate with her will enjoy the conversation. And so I would say huge thanks, and a lot of the information comes from her brain and her experiences. But we did want to mention that we've already scheduled a bit of a time on the calendar that worked for the two of us to answer questions from anyone that they have out of this. And so that's going to be 11:30 Eastern Time, US, Canada, on Thursday, October 16th. And Sabi showed everyone on the website, on the homepage, where you can register for that meeting time slot. But again, our emails are listed here, and like a huge thanks to MCI and the Argosy Foundation gift to the MCI, which enabled this work. And then also, I will say that, like I mentioned, this is a curation of what we've found to be very useful and what else is out there in the world. There's a lot of information about biotech startups, about VC in general, and a lot of experts that know way more than us. But we've curated a lot of that in here, and we've just highlighted a few additional playbooks that have been very useful for the earliest stage scientist founders. So let me say thanks again, and I will turn it over to maybe Heather for fielding any questions, discussion points.
Thanks, Aaron. That was great. So much content to go over. So I know folks really need some time to dig into the microsite and everything. And thanks, Sabi, for walking everybody through that. I do want to make sure that we have room for some comments. We still have a couple or questions. We have a few minutes left for that. But I'm also curious, to your point, if anyone on the call wants to jump in to add any sort of sentiments about their own experiences from the startup side of things and how these resources would have been helpful, or any additional insights. So the people who know I'm looking at them know I'm looking at them, but I won't call names. So if anyone wants to jump in, though, please do. Um, and then in the meantime, I just want to call out a couple of things. That one, I do think the mental health part that you put in here, I just want to applaud you and Janine for that. I think a lot of times we don't acknowledge how exhausting this process is. It's your heart and soul. You're working so hard on something that is an 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 intellectual sort of stimulation for you to go out on your own. Like, it's actually a very huge thing to go out and start a company, and whether you're spinning out from a university or whatever the case may be. So I think having that in there, and I know we've all talked about this a lot from the get-go, is just a really great addition, because it makes you feel like, okay, I'm not the only one who feels this way. It's a lot. You're putting everything out there. You're on, and watching you go through this as a friend and colleague has been really a lot, to see you go through these intensive runs of just like back-to-back meetings, and you're putting everything in. So I think giving yourself some grace is also an important part of all the technical aspects of that. So I just wanted to call that out. But I see Jen has a question.
You guys are amazing. Thank you so much for this presentation. I am beyond, I've gone beyond my science background and I'm venturing into an educational market. So I'm actually trying to structure a educational system for outside of the school system for sex and reproductive education for boys. So I'm trying to figure out how to find funding to support me. Thanks. To support me for the time that it'll take to develop the course and the curricula, because that's just like it has to be on the back burner while I'm doing the 8 to 5 work. So I don't know if you had any suggestions on people like I'm definitely going to dig into the information that you've provided, but if anything pops out, I would love to hear it.
I'll think on that.
Okay. Naja? Oh, Naja.
Well, I saw you staring at me.
You had your hand raised. Did you have something you wanted to say?
Oh yeah, I must have hit the wrong button. No, jokes aside, the only other thing I would say what has helped us, so Kash and myself, from Your Choice Therapeutics was, and I think that's very easy for startups that spin out of a university where there is kind of an infrastructure for accelerators or incubators. If you find a way into such a program where other startups are dealing with, I think, the same things, sure, you will probably be the only reproductive biology company, but the ins and outs of dealing with investors, how to make it through these crazy days. I think it's also tremendously helpful if you have people who are going through the same shit. And I cannot use another word here. But also, I should say, with whom you can also then share your successes because they happen as well. But sure, I think this everything that is summed up in a valley of death, um, everybody is going through it, and if you can share your pain, uh, that's also helpful. And also, you're growing your network. And again, it might not be in the reproductive field, but it's in the field of startups and industry. And
Yeah, that's
that's
absolutely.
perhaps a small add-on.
Oh, great. That's a great point. It's very helpful. I would say investors making intros to other investors is what you always want to have happen, but other CEOs making intros to investors is right behind that. And we found great networking from that. But also just strategy, just like you're saying, which is tied into also the mental health of it and strategizing how you can deal with it. So yeah, thanks. Great point.
Yeah. Or even just, practice your pitch.
Yeah, yeah.
And if it makes sense to people who are not savvy in reproductive biology, I mean, you get an idea if it's landing or if it's totally not landing.
Point two. Tracy, I see you came off. You came
Yeah.
on video. Did you have something you wanted to add?
Yeah, well, it's just a question actually. So Nadia mentioned partnering with university interest groups that would be sort of almost like incubators. And I'm wondering if you go that route, what they expect in return. So far, conversations that I've had range from, well, we'll rent you a space, but it's $150 an hour, to just come to this meeting and we'll introduce you to some people. So I'm wondering, what kinds of things you might expect the university to require in return, with increasing support. And that's a question for anyone, really.
I think from our experience, I can only say every program is different. Some, yeah, I think we were part of two incubator programs at UC Berkeley. They didn't ask for anything in return. But then Y Combinator, for example, sure, they want a share of your company. But I think that's also something every startup has to go through. Like beggars can't be choosers. Like um, like if you want some early money, yes, you have to be open to the idea of giving away certain percentage of your company. But I think it will help you to make progress, and so I think it's more of a win than it is your loss. Sure, if somebody would ask for 60% of your company, I mean, that's completely insane. But um, yeah, but usually, yes, it is a give and take, and you are raising a good point, because what perhaps in the beginning might not sound like a lot of control you might give up, uh, it could happen in the future, or the other way around. But then it's again, do you want to make progress, or which means you also have to give away a little bit. Does that make sense? I have the feeling I'm just gibbering away.
It does. I'm sort of in a position where I need to decide if I'm going to venture out and try to keep the IP independent of other major entities for now, or if I'm going to double in on giving things back to a university, which has its benefits, but it also has its costs. And I'm not even sure how to negotiate those to get the best deal for what I'm trying to do, which is essentially the same thing y'all are trying to do. But so to try to get the best deal for the space, to have the best chance of getting a male contraceptive to market and adding to that space. How do you negotiate the best deal so you're not giving it away and ending up as one of these companies that the university sold to somebody that shelved it or something like that? Um, yeah.
I know we're over, and I see Ted has a question, but I'm going to jump in, Erin, sorry, and just say this is a great time to remind everybody that Erin and Janine have offered office hours as well. So I urge you guys to please, like, as this stuff sort of resonates and you keep thinking, reach out to them. They're both great to talk to. So please take advantage of that. That's another important part of this dissemination for us, is just to have these conversations. And Ted, I think you had a question.
Actually, it's not a question, it's a suggestion.
Let's
And
have it.
eventually I'll figure out how to lower my hand. There we go. To Tracy's point, and to an extent to Nadja's and Jennifer's as well. And again, Aaron, really nice job on this. And I'm so sorry that Janine couldn't be with us today, because I know she's put a lot into this too. But you did a great job presenting it, and really nice job on the background work on this. But basically, my suggestion is, particularly for the situations like Tracy's just mentioned, where you're trying to make these sort of strategic decisions. I would encourage you to not make them alone. I would encourage you to think about, because there's lots of ramifications, and some of which you may anticipate, some of which you cannot. It's hard to see all the angles on your own. I would encourage you to create a trusted network of advisors. And by this, I mean like 2 or 3 people who you're comfortable having them maybe sign an NDA, or something along those lines, where and NDAs are easy. You can get templates online. They're not complicated. But sign it in your capacity as an individual, or ideally as the head of this little company that you created. Um, get advisors that you can trust, whose only responsibility is to advise you, right? And maybe you do give them a percentage, but maybe you don't even discuss that. Maybe you don't even talk about any compensation. They're just, colleagues that you respect. Maybe it's, somebody like Aaron or something like that, who is going to give you an honest perspective, and they're willing to sign an NDA and have a confidential conversation with you about, well, my tech is really powerful. It does this and this, but I don't know how it could be applied, or it's a platform technology. I've helped found to start up 3 platform technology companies, and what that platform looks like, how it spins out, who has rights. There's one company where we were negotiating the exit of the IP from the university, and they were so paranoid because our CFO was so aggressive and so optimistic about how fast he would turn this into revenue, that like the whole process slowed down by an additional 3 months, so that the university could put in a clawback provision if the company actually made positive revenue within the first year. And of course it didn't, right? It took like 2 years to even come close, right? But so getting some people in your corner whose sole responsibility is to give you advice to help you make your decisions. Maybe that maybe at some point they become a co-founder or something like that. So you have them in the room with you on a regular basis. But I would encourage you to do that. Get other people's perspectives who've done this kind of thing before, ideally, or at least have some idea of what it is you're talking about, the technology you're doing. I don't know who that is for any of you, but I would encourage you to get different perspectives and have that kind of positive, supportive conversation. And they may give you pressure test questions that are uncomfortable. They may say, well, how the hell are you going to commercialize this? What's your market fit? You got a cool idea here, but who's ever going to buy this from you? Who's the ultimate customer? How much money are they going to make? What are you creating a whole new field, or are you in competition with somebody who's already there? And you may not have the answers to those questions, but sooner or later, you're going to have them. And so if they surface some of those things early, as uncomfortable as that conversation is, it could really help you for the long term. So that's it. I'll shut up.
Oh, thanks, Ted. I think that's a super important comment as well. So I really appreciate everyone who has offered their thoughts here at the end. Some of those things are sprinkled in, without reading them, but they should be giant red flag, not red flags, but signs, because you can't do it alone. Thanks.
Erin, I can let you close from here. Thank you again for sharing all of this with today and with the community in general, and for all the work that went into it. I know this was a lot, so I will let you wrap things up.
Okay. Hey, I mean, it's a relatively small community, but there's a number of folks on the line. That's great. I'm glad that there was some interest. Thanks for all the support, and from other people who have even more experience than myself for tuning in and offering up their thoughts. Feel free to email myself, to email Janine. You can chat with both of us together. You can chat with us individually. Won't take offense to that. She's great, better than me, so chat with her. We've enjoyed putting this together, and I think also we should all just, again, this is MCI doing its thing, and so thanks to Heather and Sabi for enabling, facilitating, requesting, everything. So, and thanks everyone. Good luck. Let me know how it goes.
Thank you. You too.
Cheers.
Okay.